Molly,
I have a question.
sure.
Going forward, I suspect there are going to be some changes. Any idea what they might be
What, I guess more specifically, what kind of changes?
with part-timers and people like that? And I
Um,
mean, they're just going to go back to status quo.
sure. I guess Molly, the big thing there is just depends on what we can and can't do. Um, Obviously, if and when things return somewhat to normal, whatever normal is, yeah, that we certainly will engage everybody like we did. I think the challenge right now is none of us know when and how that's going to adapt. And, this is a total different business model from what we've traditionally had. I think I guess that for us is the biggest challenge. I mean, there's nothing that we're doing right now we're looking to change this or change that specifically. But at the same time, I just don't know how things are going to play out long term. If things, in the next 3 to 6 months for some reason change and we're able to do gatherings in a broader way and in a way that's more resembles what we had, then we're still going to need staff to do that. If things stay like they have been, for the last 75 days, obviously we're limited in what we can do. So I don't really have an answer, and that's not something that we really put a plan in place, because I think whatever that would be is temporary in nature to begin with.
Because it appears to me they're starting to try to bring part-timers back in.
Yeah, and that is true. We are. I know based on this phase one approach where we can actually have some services and things. I know last week we had several people that came back in various capacities, depending on what we had going on. So I do know Bob has been working on and has a list of everyone who does want to come in and work. And I know some of you all have done that and want to continue that. So I know if that does change, or if you initially said you wanted to be quarantined, but now you want to work, I know that's something we're glad to make that happen. It's just right now there's so much that's unknown, and people's even with the phase one approach, people still are very antsy or unsure about what to do. And we're still, I guess when our business model went so much set on ritual and ceremony and these types of things, and now we've been more of a direct cremation or direct burial type of business, really has changed, how we operate. It's certainly not something that will last forever, but it is something, for the unknown future is something we're going to have to deal with, and certainly has changed how we work.
Okay. Good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I do know that's the biggest challenge right now, though, is this phase one is going to be, things are all over the place. You have so many places that are doing so many different things. Every church right now, like I talked last week, is handling this so different. Some churches aren't even opening, to other churches that are opening, but have got so many restrictions in place. A lot of families are like, the hell with it, it's not worth it. So I think that really, really is driving the ship here. So I think all of us originally back in March thought, this would kind of come and go by like maybe summertime, things would, be lifted and then we'd be moving forward. Right now that seems like you've got professional opinions all across the board, everybody to let's open up and get back to life today, to somebody's go burrow in your hole and don't come out until there's a vaccine. And I think that's very reflective of the clients we're dealing with. I think one of the big challenges we're going to have now is this,
and the people you're working with.
Well, absolutely it's across the board. But I think the biggest challenge now is going to be the new mask mandate that's coming out Friday, because I don't so much worry about our staff. I feel like we use good judgment on that. what I do worry about is families, because, you know, every family is different. I mean, I saw it last week, you know, a funeral I had, people are like, the hell, they're not making me wear a mask, you know, to people that were coming with masks and gloves on, you know, and that's going to be a challenge for us, you know, to try to find a way to make that work. I do know, Bob, you were working a funeral last week at Epiphany, and actually know a couple people that went to that funeral, and they actually said, because Epiphany, all Catholic churches are mandated to have, if you want to come to a mass, you have to wear a face covering. And from how that worked, from what I understood, it actually, people abided by that. Not necessarily they didn't want to, but it was, you know, it was either that or they weren't able to come in for the mass.
Yeah, you know, I think that's right. Majority of the people were compliant, and I'll have to say the church did an excellent job of enforcing that rule. Of 60 people we had 4 people that gave a little pushback, but the first time they were confronted by the church staff, they immediately put their masks on. And then another couple came in later, and they didn't have a mask. Luckily, there was a small stash of masks there on a table next to the hand sanitizer. So they were able to take a mask there, and everyone was compliant. So I think it went well, and I think they did an excellent job managing the space there at church. So, you know, I feel like we're going to, I'm hoping that when we're out in the community in churches and places like that, that we're going to have just as positive an experience that we had there, because they did a good job with it.
Other questions?
I have one.
There's Melissa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hey.
No, she's just waving.
Okay. For graveside services, is the protocol for the numbers based on what the cemetery says, or do we have a policy on that? And how are y'all working out moving the casket from, you know, usually took 6 people? So how are y'all doing that? I just haven't seen any of that going on.
Yeah, no, good question, Paul. So the graveside policy up until the phase 1 part was, you know, it's still 10 people or less. Obviously that has changed, except in the city. But honestly, all those policies, that's the cemetery's responsibility to decide and dictate how that's going to be done. I know a couple, for example, Forest Lawn for a while was almost requiring a direct burial before the family could come out to do a funeral. And I also know at the same time, Hollywood was pretty much whoever showed up was allowed to come. So you've got totally different policies in different places. And we're having to treat it just like we would a church. You know, it's their property. They get to decide what the rules are. Obviously, because it is an open space, cemeteries do, you know, present themselves to allow for better social distancing or separating out than an inside building would. But I have not yet seen it get so crowded where things got out of control. The funeral I had for Father Adrian on Friday, you know, at the cemetery at the Abbey, I mean, we had probably 75 people out there, and everybody was pretty much distanced across, you know, the whole area there. What was the second part of your question, Paul? I'm getting old. I'm starting to lose it as I get old.
No,
so.
That's okay. That's okay. It was I just interested in how you all moving caskets from place to place. Who's doing all that? Since you take 6 usually to do it.
Yeah, we have. I know the funeral, there's no kind of set policy, because the challenge there is you don't know who you've got pallbearer wise. I know the funeral we had for Father Adrian the other day, we tried to use 4 pallbearers. We had two and two, kind of on either side. And, you know, trying to be smart about things like that. But you know, it's just kind of, you have to kind of weigh that as you go. I know some families have required or wanted, you know, pallbearers to wear gloves when they touch the casket. The positive, the CDC just came out, I think earlier this week or late last week, that the touching side of things is not the concern that they first thought it was. Not that it's something to not take seriously, but from that perspective of touching surfaces and stuff, it doesn't have the risk involved that the personal contact or the airborne types of things do. So I have not seen that to be a problem if we needed pallbearers.
Thank you.
Hey, Kerry, Dad, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I just sitting here thinking about going to churches and cemeteries. You know, in the old days, we always had everything in place: pens, pencils, chairs, cold water, yarmulkes. Why don't we just make masks part of the program? So when people need one, it makes us look good. We have them. That's just a thought.
Well, I know Kelly has been really good about getting a bunch of supplies for us.
Yeah.
And I know things like that. I think that's kind of the next thing is making sure that we have enough supplies. I would say that's probably would be my only concern for not trying to provide that. But I would say, I mean, if a family came in and somebody needed something, we're going to certainly work to provide that. And that could easily become an SOP type of thing in the short term that we need.
Yep. Thank you.
We have gotten our 10-minute warning, by the way, being on Zoom.
2 minute or 10 minute?
10, so now we're more like 8. Yeah.
Trying to think of anything else that's kind of hanging out there. I think the next couple of weeks, like I keep saying, and I feel like I'm a broken record. I know Bob does too, but you know, this truly is kind of a, you know, fly by the seat of your pants management. we're trying to figure this out as we go, and you know, and the landscape does change every week and every day. You know, 2 weeks ago, or heck, even a week ago, the thought of a mandated mask policy for the state, I don't think was something that was on our radar. Not that it wasn't encouraged, but that it was going to be something that's mandated. Now that is something, you know, it's trying to figure out how to, you know, how to put that in and how to do that in a way that works for everybody. So.
And Kerry, to add to that, oh, sorry.
Anybody find any Bliley's masks for us?
Actually, we're working on it. We've got a good lead. Daniel has someone, I think, in his family that's making them.
Oh, cool.
We looked at the prototype this morning, and it's very inexpensive. We're looking at the prospect of adding the Bliley B on one side. Yeah, and it's nice. It's heavy duty. The straps are heavy duty, so it looks like it would last. So it's. I think we've got a good prospect, and I think the turnaround time will be pretty quick.
Yay! Goody.
Attaboy, Daniel.
Yeah, so special shout out to Molly and Valerie for getting that going last week on our conversation.
Yep.
Yay.
Other questions anybody has for this week?
If no one has anything, I would want to share one item. The American Choral Directors Association had a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and there were 3,000 who went online to watch this webinar. And some of the issues that were presented were for choral directors such as I to have a choir, you had to have someone at the door. They're requesting someone at the door to take temperatures and ask all the questions. If any of you have been to a doctor, they ask 15 questions, and these questions will be asked to each choir member. The other issue was the ventilation issue. Is each room that you're in, is it circulating the same air, or is it bringing air from outside? And so it gave a whole new perspective on choral directors. We're not assuming to even getting together. My whole choir will not meet this fall at all. We've already called it off, and we won't meet again until January, if then. We may be out a year before we can get together as a group because of the aerosol virus that projects in a room with people singing. If you have someone who sings really loud and forceful, there are more viruses going out at that point. And the idea of actually a choir sitting in a room 6 feet apart with masks on and trying to sing, you can imagine the difficulty. So we're going through those issues right now as choral directors. Just thought I would say that.
Yeah, everything I have read about singing and things like that, it's just, because of the projection of and the aerosol, spray that goes out from there, it's definitely,